I always like to look at that nod where she says, "You're up." It reminds me of being a bull in a pen, and at some point they have to perform. So I've preached too long in rural churches, I guess. My name is Leighton Mekeal. I am a retreaded United Methodist pastor. I retired about a year and a half ago. We live in Brighton. My wife Susie is usually with me, but we actually landed on a new church. You probably don't know this, but United Methodist pastors are required by discipline to affiliate with a church in retirement so they can keep track of you, which I guess that makes sense since they kept track of you the whole time you were preaching. And so the conference is kind of our family. That's the one thing. We can't join a United Methodist Church. We are a part of the World Church, part of our ordination, and so we still have to be affiliated with the church. We are going to Park Hill United Methodist Church, which you probably have heard of and know of. And Park Hill is fairly famous in our conference for being our one integrated by their own policies by Pastor Babb back in the 60s, where when he decided to invite some of the neighbors from Park Hill to come into our church who were black, he lost half of his church membership when that happened, but he stuck to it, and now we have about 65% of our church members are black, and I'm singing in the choir, and I was telling Keith this before the service started, that I'm working on my remedial swaying and clapping, which I'm not finding I'm real gifted at. So I'm working on that. So have you pulled down your Christmas stuff? Talked about that a little bit with the kids. Do you have are you one of those legalistic, get the Christmas decorations out of here by this date? Do you have that? What's that date? Is it New Year's? Is it? Some people around here say stock show. Yeah, you gotta keep it up till after the stock show, because that's when they shut off the lights at the city and county building. You might say they shut off the lights there all the time, based on some of the decisions they make. But and there's something else special happening today. How long has it been since the Broncos played a meaningful game in January? That's been a long time. 2016. Wow. So I actually grew up on Federal Boulevard, right across the street on 12th Avenue, right across the street from the old Denver Bears Stadium. That's how old I am. It was actually a wood frame and steel stadium that I could, as a little kid, I could run across Federal Boulevard, which always drove my mom nuts. But I could run across Federal Boulevard, run down the hill to Bear Stadium, and literally watch ball games in knotholes in the fence. Of course, that all went away with the flood in 65. Do you remember the flood in 65 that took all that out? But, well, enough of that. So I wanted us to, for 1 minute, just give one more homage to Christmas. And I've got a little picture here. Speaking of grandkids, those are my grandkids. because after their babies, which you might have the cutest babies in the world, but probably not. These are my grandkids. They're in Dallas, Texas. We have to do that thing where we share grandkids with the other outlaws. So we got Thanksgiving and they got Christmas, and so this was Christmas morning at their house. Do you remember being that excited about, well, I'd say anything, but Christmas? Do you remember being that excited? Where my granddaughter Michelle and Simon, Michelle has been talking about Christmas for 8 months. 8 months. She didn't even care when her birthday was. She just couldn't wait for Christmas. So it was pretty exciting. Okay, that was free. That's not part of the sermon or anything. What we read this morning as our scripture is John 1. John 1 is considered the third Christmas story. It's a little different Christmas story, but it talks about literally the Word becoming flesh. And of course, that's exactly what happened at Christmas. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So the first Christmas story, you biblical scholars? Luke 2. There's also one in Matthew, which talks about the arrival of the wise men, or the kings, we've turned it into. That whole story of the wise men and the shepherds and the angels that we kind of schmooze together and do it all together as a nativity scene at Christmas, and a lot of times we parade the kids through it and everything. That single story doesn't exist. It's two separate stories. The Matthew story is actually about 2 years or 3 years later with the arrival of the wise men. The Luke story is the one with the angels and the shepherds. And then this is the third one in John 1, the Word made flesh. Well, there was a story told about a man who had a little girl, and he was trying to teach. The problem was the little girl kind of grew up in their bed and slept with them, and they were trying to get her to stay away from the bed a little bit, and so they could enjoy life again and sleep by themselves. And so they were trying to get her to stay in her bed. It was going pretty well, and one of the things that Dad would always say is, now, sweetie, you know, you're not with us, but God is always with you. God is with you there in your bed. And if you ever get scared, you can just ask God, and God will help you out and help you feel better. And she said, okay, Daddy. And well, that worked until a thunderstorm. And it happened later at night, and the thunder clapped, and the little girl, of course, there was this scamper across the hallway and into their bedroom and smack right in the middle of their bed. And the dad said, now, sweetie, we've talked about that. I said, I know the thunder is scary, but we talked about this, remember? When you get scared, just ask God to be with you, and you'll be okay, and you'll be able to stay in your bed. Okay, Daddy. Well, she went back over. Of course, 2 minutes later, another big crash, right in their bed again. He said, sweetie, didn't we just talk? Yeah, we just talked. Go back. Talk to God next time. Okay, all right. Sure enough, a minute later. Sweetie, I don't know how else to explain this, sweetie, about God. She said, frankly, Dad, I don't care about God. I need somebody with skin on it. Do you ever think about that? We need skin on it sometimes, don't we? I mean, we need a big hug, or we need a little peck on the cheek, or, we need to hold hands. My wife came from a big hugging family. Well, the Mekeals were good Irish, stubborn Irish, and, we didn't talk about our emotions, and, and hugging. There was never any reason to hug. We just, so I kind of been brought into hugging, kicking, and screaming after 39 years now. But I've found out it's okay to have something with skin on it. It's okay to have a little skin in your life. We look at the scripture, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word, that should sound in the beginning. Doesn't that sound like some other place in the Bible? In the beginning. That's when the Bible mentions baseball. In the big inning. No, I'm sorry. It's not baseball season. It's football season. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word. Do you think about your words, the power of your words? Do you think about the power of what happens when you say something? Your word is your reputation. Your word is your bond. Does that even have meaning anymore? Have words just gotten, dare I say, cheap? And we assume that nobody tells the truth anymore? We assume that anything we read on the internet is false, is wrong, and we don't even get me going with politics. What's happened to what I would call the sacredness of our word? And the reason I say words are that important is because Scripture says it. In the beginning was the Word. You remember that God literally spoke creation into existence. God literally spoke order out of chaos. In the Old Testament, that word is ruach. Well, let's try that. Now, you got to get a little phlegm. Hopefully, you got a little phlegm this time in the morning. But ruach is a phlegmy word. It's a good Jewish, Hebrew word. You need a little phlegm. Let's say that. Ruach. Oh, that wasn't bad, but you could work on it. Ruach literally means the wind, the spirit, the life-giving presence of God. In the New Testament, it's that ruach, that wind and spirit, was like the wind that went over the dry bones in Ezekiel. Remember the valley of dry bones, and the wind, God's Spirit, came over the dry bones, and they knit themselves back together and got up and started dancing. That's what God's Spirit, what God's wind does. In the New Testament, it's the Greek word of pneuma. Let's say pneuma. Now, you should know pneuma because that's the root for the word pneumonia, which is literally the disease of the breath. The disease of the breath. See, there's power in our word. There's power because it gives us meaning and spirit and opportunity and passion. It's everything. It's who we are. People should be able to depend on what we say because it has power, it has meaning, it should have purpose. The scripture goes on and says, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God in the beginning. Literally, that means Jesus the Word, Jesus, was there with God too. So when Jesus was there at the beginning too, everything came into being through the Word, and without the Word, nothing came into being. And what came into being through the Word was life. See that life-giving Word is what gives us life. And the life was the light for all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish it. See, when people can depend on our words, we have the basis for everything in life, whether it's quality relationships or good friendships, or because they can depend on us. They look forward to spending time with us because we give an edifying word, a building up a word, or we notice something. I worked with, when I first got into seminary, I had an associate pastor that I worked with, and his wife, I used to call them Ken and Barbie, because they were tall and skinny and pretty. Do you like pretty people? I kind of find them a little annoying. Because I'm a lot of things. I don't know that I would call me pretty. I got a little skin up here. I'm not ugly. I'm not painful to look at, but I get up in the morning and I don't get a big smile on my face because I see myself in the mirror. But tall, skinny people, I find a little, I'm suspicious of tall, skinny, pretty people. And Ken and Barbie were those kind of people. But she was amazing because she was 45 when I knew her, and she was still a runway model in Dallas, Texas, at the Fashion Mall. At 45. That's unheard of. We moved them they were in a little apartment. They bought a house while I was there. We moved them, and it was the most amazing thing in the world because I was moving one of her dressers, and I opened up the drawers, and she had color-coded socks, like a rainbow. The reds went into the purples, and the purples went into the blacks, and then the blacks went into the pinks, or I don't know. I don't even know what the colors are. I almost was afraid to touch it because I didn't want to make a mess that she'd have to put it back. But she was amazing. The other reason she was amazing is because she could find the most interesting. When she saw you, she got excited it's so good to see you, Leighton. Oh, I love the way that shirt just makes your eyes sparkle. And I'd say, oh, really? Well, thank you. Thank you. She could pick out something about you and make you feel like $1 million just because she noticed you and said something nice about you. The ironic thing about her was she could never, ever say anything nice about herself. You'd try to compliment her. Oh, no, this old thing, I was thinking of throwing it out. No, I didn't get my makeup right this morning. I'm sorry. She would never say anything nice about her. You want to talk about the power of words? She would use her words to lift you up and tear her down with the same mouth. James says, the book of James says, can spring water and sewer water come out of the same hole? Doesn't that kind of remind us of the power of our words? Can spring water and sewer water come out of the same hole? Well, there was another friend of mine. He was in my church, in one of the churches I served, and he was a pretty sharp guy. I mean, he was a good businessman. He had set up one of the original telephone services in Grand Junction, Colorado. He had built it up, and guess who came into town? Comcast came into town. And Comcast, rather than redo what he had done, they just said, how about we just buy your company? They bought his company for $25 million. Now, this is 25 years ago. Bought his company for $25 million. I mean, for him, that was going to be generational wealth. He was meeting with accountants to figure out how to provide money, not just for him and his wife, but his kids, his grandkids, their grandkids. How could they set up generational wealth for his family? It was about 8 months after he sold his company, and he came in to my office, and we started talking, and I said, you know, Bob, what a gift you've been given. I said, you know, that must be amazing. He said, oh, yeah, it's amazing. He's like, yeah, and I'm meeting with the accountants, and my family's excited. And he looked at me, and he said, but what do I do now? What do I do now? He's like, that company was my life. It was everything I did. It was everything I was. It's like, Leighton, what do I do now? See, with that word, with that spirit comes, the scripture said, light, which shines in the dark, gives us meaning and purpose and direction. See, that life-giving spirit of God, that breath, that ruach, that pneuma, gives us meaning and purpose. It gives us direction. It gives us everything we need in our life. But sometimes we get confused about what our meaning in life is. We get confused about what our purpose is. And we think it's about our job or our possessions or what people think about us or if people think I'm pretty or not. We get confused. We get confused and forget that this life-giving spirit, the Word, what came into being through the Word was life. And the life was the light for all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish the light. And the true light that shines to all people was coming into the world. The light that was Jesus in the world, and the world became into being through the light, but the world didn't recognize the light. That's when we... Do you ever have that moment in your life? Do you ever have that morning in your life when you wake up and you're just kind of laying there trying to think if you're still breathing and how far away is the coffee? And you think, is this it? Is this what my life is going to be? Is it worth everything I'm doing? Am I with the right people? Am I making the right decision? Do we ever have that moment of honesty with ourselves, whether or not we're letting the Word move in us and the life that we've been given as a gift and the light that Christ gives us to walk our path? Do we have those moments of pause where we kind of look at things? And then maybe the most, I hate it when people say, this is my favorite verse in the Bible. Okay, maybe it's your favorite verse in the Bible. The Bible's a big book. There's a lot of verses in it. Really? This one is your favorite? You know what? This verse is my favorite verse in the Bible. And the Word became flesh and made his home among us. And we have seen his glory, glory like that of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. The Word became flesh. Skin. God sent us something with skin on it to teach us, to correct us, to love us, to forgive us. It's not brain surgery. It just needed skin on it. Do you ever think about that? That what God said is, okay, I had all those prophets. I've done all this. I've used the kings. I need to just send them some skin. And the Word, the life-giving Word, Spirit, became flesh and dwelt among us.